The Coen Brothers' 1996 film Fargo is one of my favourites of all time. It brilliantly builds tension, it's got a variety of excellent characters, a unique visual style, and is overall a masterpiece of filmmaking. And one of the things I love about this film is despite the absurd events that take place, the plot still contains a lot of logic and realism, which makes me feel even more immersed in the story. Season 1 of Noah Hawley's anthology series Fargo is great. It brilliantly builds tension, it's got a variety of excellent characters, it mirrors many aspects of the original film, but also has plenty of its own things to bring to the table, and is overall a great 10-episode season of television. However, unlike the original film, the plot of this season contains a few gaps in logic and realism, which can sometimes make me feel a lot less immersed in the story. So today, I shall be comparing the plot of both the film and season 1 of the TV series. Keep in mind as we move forward that I thoroughly enjoy both of them, and believe both contain quality writing overall. This analysis will simply highlight the brilliance in one, and how the other could have made small adjustments to reach that same level. The film begins with our antagonist, Jerry Lundegaard, on his way to meet two small-time crooks from Fargo. Jerry has been put in contact with one of these guys through Shep, the mechanic, which means before any criminal activities have even taken place, there are already degrees of separation between these characters. From an outsider's perspective, there are no obvious connections. Jerry sits down with these two gentlemen and speaks about both the plan and the money.
You got the car?
Yeah, you bet. It's out in the lot there, brand new burnt umber Sierra.
Yeah, okay, well, sit down then.
Here are the keys.
No, that's not it, Jerry. The new vehicle plus $40,000.
Yeah, but the deal was the car first, then the $40,000. Like as if it was the ransom.
Jerry is an executive sales manager at his father-in-law's car dealership, and is therefore able to supply these criminals with a car. This is the only connection that can link back to Jerry. But with such a bizarre motive, it's unlikely anyone would suspect a thing. Even one of our antagonists can't quite get his head around it.
I will say this, though. What Shep told us didn't make a whole lot of sense. You want your own wife kidnapped.
Yeah.
My point is, you pay the ransom, what, 80,000 bucks? I mean, you give us half the ransom, 40,000, you keep half. It's like robbing Peter to pay Paul. It doesn't make any sense.
Oh, okay. See, it's not me paying the ransom. My wife, she's wealthy. Her dad, he's real well off. Now, I'm in a bit of trouble.
What kind of trouble are you in, Jerry?
I'm not gonna get into... See, I just need the money. Now, her dad, he's real well off.
So, why don't you just ask him for the money?
It's all part of this... They don't know I need it, see? Okay, so there's that. And even if they did, I wouldn't get it.
The plan goes ahead, but not without a lot of bloodshed. And this is when we're introduced to our lead protagonist, Marge Gunderson. She is an exceptional detective and manages to narrow down the leads, and ends up confronting Shep after he received a phone call from the crooks. And in the very next scene, she goes to the car dealership and speaks to Jerry, and questions if any vehicles have gone missing recently. Now the problem with Marge is that she is way too nice, which most of the time is a good character trait to have, but it may not work out quite as well when investigating such a serious case. The problem here is that she doesn't pressure Jerry enough. She sees the good in everyone, and feels there is no reason for him to lie. But later she meets someone from high school who turns out to be a blatant liar, which made her have some introspection. She then had the mental clarity to realise that despite her excellent detective work, she has a problem of taking people at their word. So she goes back to the car dealership, this time with the intention of pressuring Jerry a lot more.
The crime I'm investigating, the perpetrators were driving a car with dealer plates, and they called someone who works here, so it'd be quite a coincidence if they weren't, you know, connected. Could I talk to Mr. Gustafson?
Jerry knows that he's cornered. He knows there's now suspicion of his involvement and connection with the missing car, and subsequently, the victims. Mr. Gustafson now being one of them. In a rather angry tone, he states that he will go out and do a lot count, but seizes the quick opportunity to drive away and flee the interview, essentially confirming that he's guilty. Marge Gunderson later catches up with the crooks, one of them in the wood chipper, and the other she manages to arrest.
So that was Mrs. Lundegaard on the floor in there. And I guess that was your accomplice and the wood chipper. And those 3 people in Brainerd. And for what? For a little bit of money. There's more to life than a little money, you know. I just don't understand it.
And after that, Jerry is arrested. With traces leading back to our main antagonist, and the competent police work that only required adjusting a certain perspective on the case, it was only a matter of time before these villains got put behind bars. The conclusion of this film is fully realised with these characters and their positions in the story, resulting in a bittersweet ending. If you were to have a similar story structure but alter certain aspects, that conclusion may not be quite as satisfying. And that brings us along to Season 1 of Fargo. Lester Nygaard is one of the main antagonists of Fargo Season 1. Even aside from the very similar name, he ends up having a lot in common with Jerry, especially in regards to his lack of empathy. We very quickly learn that Lester has been belittled his whole life, by his peers at school, his younger brother, and his wife. Well, that all changes when Lester meets Lorne Malvo, who ends up killing Sam Hess, Lester's high school bully, and later gives a speech to Lester about what it means to stand up for yourself.
Your problem is you spent your whole life thinking there are rules. There aren't. We used to be gorillas. All we had is what we could take and defend. The truth is, you're more of a man today than you were yesterday.
How do you figure?
It's a red tide, Lester, this life of ours. The shit they make us eat, day after day. The boss, the wife, etc. Wearing us down if you don't stand up to it. Let them know you're still an ape. Deep down where it counts. You're just gonna get washed away.
This is very clearly something that Lester agrees with. He just lacked the confidence that Malvo has, but he didn't on this occasion. On this occasion, he threatens his wife with a hammer, and when she doesn't take back her words, he brutally murders her. Straight away, unlike Jerry, Lester directly murders his wife in their own home. The show has now got a much more difficult task of justifying how he gets himself out of this. So after that, he then phones Malvo with the intention of shooting him with a shotgun, and framing him for the murder of his wife. Despite clearly agreeing with and feeling motivated by Malvo, Lester ultimately just wants to cover his own tracks. But there's a slight issue, as the chief of police at Bemidji shows up at Lester's house. He plans on asking Lester some questions about the murder of Sam Hess, but Lester is then caught as the chief notices bloodstains at the top of the stairs. However, Malvo enters through the back of the house, grabs the shotgun, and shoots the chief. We later see that one of these shotgun pellets went through the chief and into Lester's right hand. Malvo disappears, and Officer Molly Solverson turns up to the house. So Lester runs directly into the wall of the basement and knocks himself out, using this as a way to pretend that he's the victim. He later wakes up in hospital. There's a close-up shot of his wounded hand, and whilst it's nothing extreme at this point, it is clearly very noticeable. And considering that he would have been changed out of his normal clothes and into hospital clothes, you would imagine the hospital would be more than aware of this, on top of his head injury. And if they were to notice, this information would have been passed along to the police right away.
Shotgun pellet looked like. Had some fabric attached to it, so possible the pellet passed through something before getting into Lester's hand.
And considering Lester was found in the basement alongside his wife who had been murdered with a hammer, and the chief of police was murdered with a firearm on the ground floor, Lester would now have to justify how a shotgun pellet ended up in his hand, and would absolutely have to give a convincing story with the timings of events. On top of that, our main protagonist, Molly Solverson, is very different to Marge Gunderson. She questions everything, and always knew there was something wrong with Lester from day one. Molly speaks to the new chief of police, Saul Goodman, about questioning Lester. Saul responds with his personal experience with Lester, claiming that he's absolutely harmless, and couldn't possibly be tied to any of these murders. But if the pair of them knew about the wounded hand, Molly would be even more skeptical, and Saul would at the very least question Lester right away. but he does in the end go along with Molly's idea, so long as he can be there.
You said that, you came home and found your wife, that she was already dead?
Downstairs, yeah.
You don't remember Chief Thurman coming to the house then?
Oh, no. No, I feel sick about that, really. I guess he saw the guy breaking in.
No, Mr. Nygaard, Chief Thurman came to talk to you about a man you may have met in the emergency room the day previous. She saw you and this other fella arguing about Sam Hess.
Well, you remember Sam. He used to beat you up in high school.
What?
That was a long time ago.
You were talking about him in the emergency room, so what's the story there?
It's real fuzzy, but I might have said my face is a mess. A mess sounds like Hess. Probably the witness just misheard.
But Molly simply isn't satisfied with Lester's answers, and confronts him later in the drugstore whilst he's trying to find treatment for his wound. Saul is not very happy when he hears Molly won't leave Lester alone, and therefore decides to take her off the case. The next couple episodes of the season highlights Lester's hand getting much worse due to the infection. By episode 5 he is rushed to hospital, and Molly takes this as a good opportunity to question him.
Did you pay Lord Malvo to kill Sam Hess?
I never paid him.
Okay, offered to pay then. Made a deal, and then when he came for the money?
I never paid. I didn't pay.
And she later finds out this was a shotgun pellet in his hand.
Shotgun pellet looked like. Had some fabric attached to it, so possible the pellet passed through something before getting into Lester's hand.
You're someone.
And Lester now has an officer waiting outside his hospital room. The pressure is certainly on him now, and the reason for Lester's wounded hand is now making sense from a narrative perspective. Where the show steers from here will depend on whether or not this particular aspect is well written. So Lester very cleverly escapes from hospital, drives to his house, and retrieves the hammer. And straight away it's important to understand that this would be pretty much impossible if the wound had been picked up the first time he was in hospital, because at that point in time Lester's house would still be a crime scene. But Lester then takes the hammer, hides it in his brother's house, and manages to frame him for the murder. Again, the opportunity to do this would have been incredibly unlikely if he was found out on day 1. But Saul Goodman makes the arrest, and aside from Solverson, everyone else views this case as closed. The season then jumps forward an entire year. Lester is extremely successful and happy with his second wife. It's only when Lester bumps into Malvo again that even more blood is shed, his second wife also becoming another victim. These events have now all piled on top of each other, and Lester knows he can't keep his story straight for much longer, and understands that he's cornered. He tries his best to run, but this results in his death. Both the film and season 1 of the TV show contain many aspects of quality writing, but when it comes down to the plot and characterization, it is clear the film comes out on top. Jerry and Lester had a lot in common. They were both looked down upon by those around them. They both wanted respect and success, and they of course both had a lack of empathy towards their wives. The major difference is that Jerry had a plan. That plan of course went very wrong very quickly, and it was only a matter of time before things caught up with him, but he still had a plan. On top of that, the protagonist could often only see the good in people, which clouded her judgment of the case. Therefore, the gap between Jerry's first contact with the crooks and him getting arrested is completely justified in the story. Lester had absolutely no plan, with a couple things that meant his story didn't add up, and the protagonist questioned everything, and wouldn't quit no matter what. Therefore, the gap between Lester's first contact with Malvo, murdering his wife, and getting cornered, is not justified enough in the story. I love both the film and season 1 and will continue to rewatch them. Enjoyment and recognizing the level of quality in a piece of art are not always connected. I admire Noah Hawley's work for this season, but when it comes to writing a superb crime thriller, no one does it quite like the Coens. And when it comes to quality writing, very few things can top the 1996 masterpiece, Fargo.